Raider Nation, what's going on? I got a question for you that I want you to go down in the comments section and please answer. Give me a yes, give me a no. Will Christian Wilkins play this season? Depending on how you answer this one, really could determine what type of trade the Raiders could pull off. Coming up today here on the Raiders Report, I have 5 blockbuster trade ideas for the Raiders to help replace Christian Wilkins, whether he plays or he doesn't play this upcoming season, since he needs that second surgery on that Jones fracture. These trades, by the way, are not one-sided, which I mean, like, I'm not putting out a trade idea just because it helps out the Raiders. I'm putting out trade ideas that I think would make both sides for the silver and black and for whatever team. And I did this a little bit differently in terms of how I'm going to call these teams, because essentially, if I was in a room with John Spytek and Pete Carroll, I would pick up the phone and I would call certain NFL teams. I'm going to tell you which teams I'm going to call first, which teams I'm going to call second, so on and so forth, and I'll also give you some trade ideas around each of those teams. If you did not see this photo, it's been circulating on social media. It was a picture of Christian Wilkins, thus confirming that this still Jones fracture injury is still been lingering around. If you missed my video from last Friday where I broke it down that he's going to need another surgery, he is going to try to play through the injury based on what I have been told. But if he gets the surgery, he's going to be out for the season. If he tries to play through it, you might not get 100% of the Christian Wilkins that we all know and love, or at least want to have. So if you know that, if Pete Carroll and John Spytek know that, could they potentially go out, make a trade? That's what this entire video is all around. So the very first team that I am calling in terms of a Christian Wilkins replacement trade is the Baltimore Ravens. And I do want to say this very, very clear. First off, I would try to find somebody on the open market. If I can't find anybody on the open market, there's names out there the Raiders could go out and get. But if, let's just say, the Raiders didn't like the possible open-ended free agents, then that's when you'd pick up the phone and start calling. So why are the Baltimore Ravens the first team that I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling? I'm calling because I'm looking to bring back John Jenkins, because at the end of the day, I don't think that the Raiders are going to make a huge splash going out and trading for a defensive tackle. To me, the guy that I think actually makes the most sense, and I'm a little bit aggravated that the Raiders, knowing what they knew around the Wilkins situation this offseason, didn't do everything in their power to at least try to bring back Jenkins on a 1-year cheap deal, because right now, we're in a bad situation. He's got a great relationship with Rob Leonard and Patrick Graham from his previous playing experience. Also, Jenkins has experience on that Miami Dolphins squad. If the Silver and Black were to go out and trade for him, you'd have to pay him $1.3 million this upcoming season. And considering what Jenkins made last season for the Raiders, you know, like, that's half of the price tag. Jenkins, though, last year, 46 tackles, a sack, 3 tackles for loss, and ultimately, I don't think his PFF numbers really illustrate how good of a player he was last season for us. Kind of like the exact same way I would say about an Adam Butler. But he did prove to play a pivotal role when Wilkins went down and when multiple players on this Raiders defense ended up going down. Over 600 snaps played, and I'm not looking for somebody that's going to go out there and dominate in terms of the sack numbers. I'm looking for somebody that can take on some double teams, that can help other players around him become better. And that's what John Jenkins is ultimately going to do. So because of his coaching connections, because also the connections with the Las Vegas Raiders, out of anybody that I'm going to bring up on this video, I think the most likely option would be John Jenkins. So what I decided to do here is do a trade idea. And I'm going to do a trade idea for every single one of these, and I'm going to try to make them a little bit different. I thought this one was an interesting idea overall, because I do think Trey Taylor is a player that could potentially get cut by the Silver and Black. And if you know that you might be moving on from somebody, could you at least try to flip him in a trade? Trading the 35-year-old for somebody in their 20s could be something that Baltimore's interested in. I'll also say this. The Ravens lost Ardarius Washington a little bit earlier this offseason, who was the safety. And I don't know if y'all know this, but Trey Taylor is related to Ed Reed, who is probably the greatest safety of all time for the Baltimore Ravens. So that's the first trade idea, and I know we're getting a little bit crazy. We're getting a little bit off the wall. Sometimes that's going to happen in the month of June. What's also pretty mind-blowing to me is that we are 60 subs away from 195,000. I can remember the first time I hit 1,000 subs. I can remember when we hit 10,000 subs, and I dyed my hair gray, which was Though it's probably silver is how I should say it. This show continues to grow, and I love being able to do this. And if you appreciate the content that we put out every single day, make sure you're subscribed. Help us get to 195,000. Let's go to the second team that I am calling here, and it's going to be the Chicago Bears, because the Bears have a certain player, and I'll be real. I reached out to our Bears host, Harrison Graham, and I said, do you think that this guy's going to be available? He's like, no, I don't really see why Chicago would trade him. However, I would at least pick up the phone and I would see if I can get him. And it's Andrew Billings. Here's the thing with Billings. When he's on the field and he's healthy, he's a good football player. The problem is he doesn't have the ability to stay on the field all too often, which maybe is the reason why you wouldn't want to go out and get him. Billings played on the Raiders in 2022, and also he was with the Miami Dolphins in 2021, where Rob Leonard coached him. So not only do you have the Patrick Graham experience, you also have some of that, a little bit added of the Rob Leonard experience. Also, Chicago, they added Grady Jarrett this offseason, and there's been a lot of rumors around Jarrett already being that defensive tackle that he is known to be. For the Raiders, if you go out and you make this deal, it's going to cost you $2.1 million this upcoming season for him to play. And Billings, to me, again, when he was on the field last season, he was a good player. 297 snaps, a 78.6 pass rush grade, which I think is a very, very impressive number overall. But when you look at the last 4 seasons, it's the games missed that I think you really got to pay a close attention to. 8 games played last season, full season in 2023. Missed a few games in 2022, played in only 6 games in 2021. Now, again, Billings is a big boy on the interior, and I think if you're looking for a little bit of upside here, Billings does have some of that upside, which is why I have him basically at number 2. John Jenkins doesn't have the upside Billings does, but I can rely on Jenkins playing, basically the entire season. And I know it's hard to be able to predict injuries, but there are certain guys that are more injury prone than others. There's no doubt about it. So I'm looking at Jenkins. I'm looking at Billings. The deal that I would offer Chicago, it's this. And when I asked Harrison, what would you want for Billings? He's like, probably a 5th-round pick. So I decided, let's offer a 6th-round pick. And one of the biggest needs right now for the Chicago Bears is linebacker, and it's finding an interior linebacker. I like Tommy Eichenberg. He was drafted in the 5th round by the Raiders, but this is another player that could potentially be a cut candidate. And if you know that you're not going to keep somebody, at least offer him in a trade. So the Raiders get Billings, the Bears get Tommy Eichenberg, and a 6th-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. Let's go to number 3, the third team that I'm calling here. If I'm trying to replace Christian Wilkins, it's going to be the Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers have another defensive tackle that there's been some trade rumors around, and I'll tell you this, everybody outside of John Jenkins on this video has been linked by either ESPN or a beat reporter in terms of being a potential trade candidate. One of the biggest trade candidates for Carolina has been A'Shawn Robinson, 30 years old. He's missed 8 games the past 4 years, and Carolina signed Bobby Brown, Tershawn Wharton, and they also drafted Cam Jackson on day 3 of the past NFL Draft. The trade cost for the Silver and Black, $5.8 million this upcoming season. And I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit more money than what I would want to pay Robinson, especially because there are certain players, when you look at stats, I think they can really misconstrue your conception of how good of a player this guy actually is. The reason why I would entertain the idea is because if he goes out and he has a great year, you get him for $7.6 million the following year. And defensive tackles typically make a lot more money. If he doesn't have a good year for you, you wipe your hands clean. He's got no guaranteed money in 2026. And again, if I'm Robinson and I get traded, I look at that as a 1-year prove-it deal. And anytime I hear players taking 1-year prove-it deals, or they know, hey, it's a contract year, and at 30 years old, you want to go out there and prove it, I think we would get the good version out of Robinson, who played 761 snaps last season for Carolina, and the numbers aren't great. Again, according to PFF, I also think that when you look at the stats overall for Robinson, who's typically a little bit taller, a little bit lighter, and just overall weight than what we see sometimes from these guys. But some people would look at these numbers and go, man, 80 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, all career highs. Yes, those are good numbers, but I did reach out to a few of my people that cover the Carolina Panthers, and I was like, well, what exactly do you think about A'Shawn Robinson? And they literally were like, he's pretty overrated. And they said that because he did put up good numbers, but they considered a lot of those stats empty, so please just keep that in mind. But at 6'3", 320 pounds, Robinson, I was thinking of another defensive tackle. Robinson has the body that this team is looking for in terms of finding another nose tackle and finding another big body guy. Because at this point, if you trade for somebody like him, it's again, you're trying to trade for a defensive tackle to help out Max, to help out Malcolm, to help out Tyree, to help out Adam Butler, and just take on some of that extra double team work. So here's the third trade idea. And as you can see, you're going to see a common theme here. I like the Camryn Richardson. I would like for the Raiders to try to get the most out of him. But again, now I'll tell you this. I don't expect Richardson to get cut by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're also sitting there going, well, could the Raiders add a corner? And at the time that I'm filming this video, Shaquille Griffin just signed with the Seattle Seahawks. But if you remember, the Raiders did also bring in Griffin in for a visit. Does that mean that they could potentially bring in another corner? Because if they do end up bringing in another corner, that kind of makes the Camryn Richardson that fifth man and the odd man out. If that's the mentality that the Raiders have, let's go out and get a defensive tackle like Robinson who can help out our defensive line. You move on from a fourth-round pick, which definitely sucks a little bit, but buy an old regime and you trade away a sixth-round pick to help out your team this season. I don't think it's the worst idea possible. I got two more trades coming up here on today's show, but if you're a Raiders fan and you love America, I got something for you. If you're not a Raiders fan and you don't love America, don't pay attention here for the next 30 to 45 seconds. I'm going to tell you that right now. Go to chatsports.com/RaidersUSA. If you're watching this video, you pull up Friday. I'll tell you what Jeremy just said to me. Seriously, though, you need some red, white, and blue? I got you. If you're like, no, Mitch, I don't need any red, white, and blue. Well, then screw you. Chatsports.com/RaidersUSA. I'm somebody where I feel like during St. Patty's Day and the 4th of July, I never know what to wear because I don't have a lot of green and I don't have a lot of red, white, and blue stuff. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't. I wear a lot of silver and black. You guys see me all the time, though. I'm literally wearing a blue hat today. Bottom line, if you love the Raiders and you love America, it's chatsports.com/RaidersUSA. That link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments and in the description of today's show. If you don't get a shirt, I'm just going to think either A, you hate the Raiders, or you hate America. Let's go to number 4 here. It's going to be the Atlanta Falcons are going to be the next team that I decide to pick up the phone and I give a call. I'm going to warn you, this name, Jeremy and I went over it multiple times. I'm probably not going to get it right. David Onyemata, ESPN reported earlier this offseason that Atlanta could look to move on from him. He's 32 years old, and if the Falcons trade him, they save $10.5 million. If the Raiders were to go out and get him, it's going to cost $10 million to go get him this upcoming season. I'll be honest with you. It's a little bit, of a heavy price tag, not going to lie. But when you talk to a lot of Falcons fans, and when I reached out to our Falcons guy here at Chat Sports, I said, do you think Atlanta trades him? And he literally responded with, if the Falcons are trying to win, they are not going to move on from him. Though, there could be a scenario where maybe Atlanta's upper guys, like Arthur Blank, always going to look at that check. He's going to look at how much money he's bringing in, and he's probably going to sit there and go, shit, man, we are losing a lot of money on the Kirk Cousins deal. Here's a way that maybe he can make up a little bit of that money. 567 snaps last season in the ATL, and overall, he had a good year. And I do think that this is the type of player that I do think would be a fun guy with the silver and black because of that mentality that he brings, and he's kind of known for being a mean mother effer. And guess what? I want my defensive linemen to be mean mother effers. And at 6'3", 300 pounds, somebody who has played in a lot of games the past 3 seasons, only 3 games missed, 45 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. He has done a good job in the NFL, and I'm looking at opportunities where maybe I can buy low on certain guys and maybe I can go out and get other players. I will say I think Atlanta still has a little bit of a need at defensive line, so I don't know if this is a trade that they would ultimately do, but because he's been linked to trade rumors, I decided to put him here in this article. Before I break down what the trade could potentially look like, I do want to give you a huge shout out to the Noti Gang. I put out a video with Jalen Ramsey, big Ramsey news, and the first 5 commenters that I saw, Sean Irish, Darth Raider, Matt R., Josiah Fernandez, and I like it when you call me Big Papa. Throw your hands in the air. No, seriously though, shout out to y'all, the Noti Gang. I greatly appreciate it, and if you want to get a shout out on the show, subscribe and be one of the first people to comment on the videos. Let's go to the 4th trade idea. You got Onyemata here at defensive tackle, and Atlanta gets a 5th-round pick in 2026 because he's still a reliable player, and depending on who you talk to from the Atlanta Falcons, he's a starter. And if I wanted to give up a starter, the reason why it's only a 5th, it's because of the price tag. I think Atlanta would be willing to give up a player who they view as a starter because of the money that they're able to save, because this has been a team that's been looking to save some money all offseason long. But let's go to the final one. Some of you are going to be like, Mitch, the Denver Broncos will never make a trade with the Raiders. Interdivision trades don't happen. I hear you loud and clear. But what if I could prove to you that an interdivision trade at the AFC West at the defensive tackle position has happened before in the last 3 years? If you're like, all right, prove it to me. Neil Farrell Jr. I get it, Raiders and Chiefs, but you know what? If the Raiders and Chiefs can make a trade, shit, why can't the Raiders and Broncos make a trade? But he's been a no-show at Broncos OTAs because he wants a new contract. So I do think it's very important to mention this. If the Raiders go out and they get John Franklin Myers, you're also going to have to give him a brand new contract. And if the Raiders go out and get him, you pay him $7.4 million this season. The moment that you go out and get him, I would imagine the Raiders say, okay, we're going to give you a 2-year extension. And I think that 2-year extension, based on our Broncos report host who I was talking to, he thinks it's going to be somewhere around 15 to 20 mil. So essentially, you're taking a player on, let's just say it's the maximum, 3 years for about $47.4 million. You can break that down however you want it, but the fact that he hasn't missed a game the last 3 seasons, the fact that he's bounced around from a few different teams and he's still done a good job, I think also the perfect example of John Franklin Myers, who, again, 28 years old, when they put him in the right system, and he was used correctly last season in Denver, he was not used correctly with the New York Jets, which maybe doesn't surprise y'all at all. But when used correctly, he proved he could be a damn good player, especially at being able to get after the quarterback. Last season, 533 snaps. I want you to look at that PFF grade overall, an 82.8. If I could steal a player that had 8 sacks last season, or 7 sacks, for the Denver Broncos, 8 tackles for loss, and I can steal that guy away from somebody who's in our AFC West, something that definitely matters to Mark Davis, somebody that's been super reliable the past 4 years in terms of being able to stay on the field, I'll be real with you. I am more than okay to have that difficult conversation. And if John Spytek and Pete Carroll can't pick up the phone and give Denver a call, even if Peyton hangs up the phone on you, at least you tried. And you know what? Maybe it even sparks a conversation of we're probably wondering, well, hey, why are the Raiders reaching out to me about John Franklin Myers? All I'm saying is if we can get somebody that helps out this team and makes the Broncos worse, I'm totally on board for it. I'll be very transparent, though. This is a low ball offer to Denver because they're not going to screw me out of getting extra draft capital. This is a trade that goes down because Denver doesn't want to pay their defensive player, and that's the reason. If this was not a situation where contracts were involved, I wouldn't even be here, right? Like, I am buying low on this situation, and right now John Franklin Myers is somebody that's sitting out there on a yard sale. You drive by, and my mom's screaming out the window, Mitchell, let's go pull over, and let's go over there and get some stuff. My mom loves herself a good yard sale, and honestly, I think that last trade is a great one. So I'm going to roll through real quickly the 5 trades that I broke down here on today's show, and if you want to let me know which trade is your favorite, if you've noticed, at the very top in yellow, they are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you could please let me know which one out of those trades is your favorite. It helps me illustrate a little bit more of what you're thinking. It also helps me just understand what Raider Nation is looking for if a trade does end up going down. Now, here's the one thing. If the Raiders do end up making a trade for these players or anybody out there in the NFL, I'm going to be live. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure those notifications are turned on.